Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, we will recap the Red Raiders' 77-70 win over Eastern Washington from United Supermarkets Arena, and we will revisit the era of the Pirate in West Texas, talking about that flat-out funky fun we had for 10 years with Mike Leach in Lubbock. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Glad to be back in the saddle with you on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and today's episode brought to you by Omaha Steaks, a gift straight from the heart, a gift that's going to be remembered with every unforgettable bite. Order with complete, total confidence today, knowing you're ordering the very best. Visit omahasteaks.com and use our promo code Locked On at checkout to get that extra $40 off, 50% off site-wide as we speak. Thanks to Omaha Steaks for bringing us this episode. Chris, we are on the heels of a Red Raider hoops win from United Supermarkets Arena. Kind of a similar conversation, I think, as far as the logistics of it all as compared to what we had regarding the win over Nichols. There was a lot of misadventure and some moments where you really felt like, boy, you couldn't buy a bucket. But I say logistics because the context wasn't actually the same. Daniel Batcho is not on the floor. You have a returning Jaylon Tyson, but I think of Jaylon Tyson a little bit disjointed offensively tonight. So are you picking up what I'm putting down? I'm trying to allow a little slack here as we process what was ultimately still a win, 77-70 for Tech over Eastern Washington.
Yeah, I mean, the score is largely the same as it was against Nichols. How you got to that point was a bit different. I mean, Nichols led by 11 points with 8 minutes left to go in the game, and I think you felt at times like, this may not go well. I don't think Eastern Washington last night was able to really ever get get out in front of you and get in a comfortable spot. I mean, it was just kind of right there neck and neck, and you just kind of controlled the end of the game and kept them at arm's length by getting to the free throw line again and things like that. But I mean, you let somebody come into your building and drop in 11 threes, it's going to be a close game more often than not. You know, this is an Eastern Washington team that heaved up 35 three-point attempts a year ago in your building, and you win by about 35 points. They would only make about 6 of those, but this year they come back, and some of these players a year older, and your team is brand new essentially. And boy, they shot themselves into that game and kept themselves into that game. As Steele Venters, the sophomore, I mean. Those are the kinds of kids like remember that name, Steele Venters. He's 6'7". He's a sophomore. He drops 26 points, makes 5 threes, and he's 6'7". Those are the kind of kids that you look at like in the offseason when you start looking at portal stuff and going, you know what? He doesn't belong at Eastern Washington. Let's go get him. You know, or types like that. That's what's is interesting. So. Anyway, but it was a bit scary. You didn't shoot it particularly well last night, but hey, you survived it, and you mentioned that no Batcho, man. That's going to make for a tough night.
Yeah, I thought it was too reminiscent of an NBA All-Star game for my taste. The Red Raiders chucking it 25 times themselves and nailing 4 of those. So you're on the board. I'd prefer a few more, but you didn't go 0 for. I guess we could say at the end of the day. But I'm curious what you saw from Jaylon Tyson. Chris, I'm just glad to see him back on the floor and wasn't expected a whole lot. What did you see from Jaylon?
Rusty. I think, people sometimes act like practice and things like that are not a big deal. We're talking about practice, the whole Allen Iverson thing. But whenever you miss, you're routine oriented and you kind of miss, some days in a row. It just, very rare is it that you just come back in and you just drop right back into to where you were. And he looked a bit rusty and disjointed, I think is well said on your part. And just not in the flow of the game at times. And unfortunately, depending on when you get Daniel Batcho back, he may have a process to work through a little bit there too, depending on how much time he misses, because he's on the bench with a boot on. Don't know if that gives me much hope that he would be available this Saturday or not, but maybe Jaylon Tyson with a game under his belt, maybe he's a much different version of himself on Saturday versus Jackson State. But it's just been the way with this team. You know, you're not very good right now just simply because you're really young and because you just can't keep everybody healthy and in rhythm. And Calvin, here's the crazy thing. You know how many minutes Kerwin Walton played tonight?
I didn't see his name listed.
Yeah, I mean that's zero. And DeMaurian Williams, he played all of 1 minute. So to the staff's credit, they have kind of made the decision. Lamar Washington deserves the minutes. Robert Jennings deserves the minutes. It doesn't matter about classification or NIL deals or anything like that. They're going with what they feel is best and investing minutes into players that they think will help them down the line. And so that's the positive. The negative there is that you're just begging and searching for bench help, and there's just not a lot to be had. So I think you're going to a couple of freshmen, and I that's who I would go with is Lamar and Robert Jennings. You know, KJ Allen factors in a bit there too, but it's interesting not seeing Kerwin Walton step on the floor or DeMaurian Williams other than 1 minute, and that's kind of the story with this particular team, because you're trying to tell me in back-to-back games you're missing a starter and there's not minutes to be had for those guys if they can help you in any way. And I think it's pretty clear what Mark and his staff's feeling is about that right now.
I'm telling you the truth when I say, first off, I'm not near enough the floor to really see what you're seeing, or even many other people in the building may be seeing as far as scanning faces and things like that. I rarely wear the lenses I'm supposed to. It's a whole thing. If you threw in a body double some night on the broadcast, I don't know that I could really check and verify from where I'm typically sitting whether that was you or not, though I typically recognize the physique and certainly the glow and the aura. But I had to, when leaving the game, Chris, looking at the numbers on my phone, I'm like, okay, was Kerwin Walton in the building tonight? Because his name isn't even there. And he was one of those that was on the short list, or has been on the short list of, does he disappear at some point as we turn the calendar to 2023? Where is he? So, yes, point made and point taken. Where you at and where you going with this team or otherwise? I did think, as we talk about some of the reserves, I didn't really feel like Lamar Washington gave back any momentum that he had individually. I thought he had another fairly impactful night in a positive way with the minutes that he was given. What'd you think about his effort?
Yeah, you know, we talked about this, you know, recently, in that his biggest issue, and it's the issue with most of these freshmen, can you do it night in and night out? And he's able to come in the game, and he doesn't, you know, I think he avoids the turnovers. Yeah, so one turnover, just looking up to make sure. He plays about 24 minutes, doesn't turn the ball over, helps you score a bit. I think he gets baited into taking a couple of threes that he's not able to knock down. But again, you're just dying to give these minutes to somebody that you feel like can help you do something. And I think Lamar has had back-to-back games here where I think you see some productive minutes, and I would expect that to continue, because he's done nothing that would suggest he deserves less minutes, or obviously nobody in practice has done anything to suggest that they deserve an opportunity, obviously, is what we're seeing what the staff feels like. So, yeah, I like what I'm seeing out of Lamar Washington. And I think the minutes he gets now will pay off in February and times like that. Like, you've got to, you know, let him play through mistakes and do some of these things, because you hope that there's a payoff, whether it be later this season or even next year.
Yeah, no doubt. And don't want to go without mentioning the effort of Kevin O'Banner, but that's the kind of effort you need from Kevin O'Banner. Unfortunately, right now, just about night in and night out, and Pop Isaacs continues popping in the right direction. So we'll see what those trends are shaping up to look like on the road, neutral site with Jackson State fitting the description of the next potential victim coming up this weekend. All right, we're leaving basketball there for the time being. Coming up directly ahead, let's travel back to our youths. Why not? As we fondly remember the Pirate of the Plains, and we fondly remember a time in West Texas where a young Chris Level was just roaming around looking for an interesting football program to cover. And little did he know he was going to be there hanging with arguably the most interesting football program in the country in its own way for the next decade. We're revisiting the special one coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you once again by our friends at Omaha Steaks, a gift that's going to be remembered with every unforgettable bite. Order with total confidence, because that's maybe the biggest thing this time of year, Chris. You may be trying to slide it in a little bit late into the shopping season, but no worries. You're probably a prep ahead kind of guy, but I'm one of those that maybe sometimes it's not ordering with total confidence because of the time at which I'm getting the order put in. How are you approaching the shopping season?
I'm a Christmas Eve go to the mall guy. No, I'm just kidding. No, I
was about to give you the solidarity fist, my man.
My wife and I, truth be told here, my wife and I typically don't get each other anything for Christmas because we'll save the money for a vacation in the summertime. Sure. We don't need anything. We try to spoil our kids. I will dabble in planning ahead a little bit for my kids on occasion. That's what we just choose to do. But yeah, my sweet dad, man, he was always a Christmas Eve go to the mall guy, and he'd get it all done in like 4 hours. I was like, yeah, there was an art to it. It would stress me out. Like, Dad, you got anything for Mom yet? He's like, he just kind of look at me, smile, but then he'd show up and they'd be all wrapped kind of in a weird way, and he would have just done it like in a 4 hour span. Like, respect to Craig Level out there, man.
Just hitting it on the mark every time. In due time, son. There is a strategy, waiting for his time, like Patton hitting the battlefield and then bang, 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 knocking them down. Okay, well, few have those skills. So if you're like me, like most normal people, you want to order with total confidence. All right, put it in somebody else's hands you can trust. And that's our friends at Omaha Steaks. 50% off site-wide, and you got the chance for $40 off your order when you're using our promo code Locked On at omahasteaks.com. Hear my words again. 50% off site-wide. Use our promo code at omahasteaks.com. Locked On. That's the promo code Locked On, LOCKEDON, and get $40 off your order at omahasteaks.com. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. He's Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Glad to be with you out west of the 100th Meridian, where it's really going down. Tough terrain out here, breeding tough men. That's from the foreword, I believe, to Mike Leach's Geronimo book, who is a former football coach in West Texas, which is just a weird sentence to say out loud, but not when you're talking about Mike Leach. Yeah, he's the kind of guy that would kick out a book on Geronimo and the Apaches in his spare time when not thinking about football. Chris, unfortunately, the news that we got was the news that many anticipated, but is not easy to process even when you have that opportunity to anticipate nor obviously get over. All kinds of warm thoughts and prayers, obviously, for the Leach family and so many who he's impacted. And I know just as a fan, how we discussed yesterday, I've been impacted. I know you take it a step further personally and working, and how that involves a personal relationship with Coach Leach in his time here in Lubbock. And I really was just curious, speaking as a fan, to know of some context, if you could take me back to some of those early days at the beginnings of what became the most interesting 10-year stretch of Texas Tech football. I don't think, maybe aside from the first 10 years, that's even an argument. I'm curious about things like RedRaiderExtreme.com. I'm curious about things like the Mike Leach Coaches Show hosted by Chris Level. I'm curious about what developed to be the relationship you had with him. And man, some of the names that were in that circle all the while who went on to be coaches, guys like Dana Holgerson and beyond. You're thinking about Biedenbaugh. You're thinking about Luttrell. And that's not even the player angle from Riley and Harrell and Eric Morris, new North Texas head coach. It's just wild. And I would love to have some context from you to help me imagine that. What were the makings of Kentucky to Oklahoma? And then I guess you're maybe in West Texas at that point, and we're hearing Mike Leach is coming from Norman to Lubbock. Can you set a scene of sorts?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I could talk about this for a long time, and yeah,
I got all night.
Yeah, well, and yesterday was very difficult for a lot of people, myself included. I think the news hit me harder than I guess I thought it would. As I remember back to a lot of these memories, and just as I was trying to figure out my life and figure out what I wanted to do, and there were so many positive memories that you had with so many people, and as you start thinking about all the relationships you still have with so many people that you just mentioned, and Mike is kind of the center of that. But I was in Lubbock. I graduated from Tech in 1996, got married the same month that I graduated, and I was doing something outside of sports and didn't really like it and all that. But in like 2002, I had an opportunity. So to start it though, Mike had like, it was an open practice policy. It was open door. There was not, it's not what you see now where everything's closed and everything's like locked
Right.
up, and there wasn't a lot of internal media, at Tech and all that. So they were looking for coverage and looking for, people to write and talk about their team in whatever capacity. And so, yeah, I just was going to practice in 2002, and I had somebody notice that I was showing up. His name was David Stroot, who I'm still but I mean, we talk occasionally via text, but I think Stroot lives in the Metroplex now. But he said, "Hey man, you interested in doing some writing and stuff?" And so that's kind of how I was like, sure. And I enjoyed doing it just because I love sports. Well, my relationship with Mike, though, he started noticing that I was out there all the time, and we just kind of got to be, and that was early. And Tech wasn't like necessarily great yet. People
There's a
remember
lot of frustration early on.
Yeah, of what is this offense? What is this?
Yeah.
Man, they just throw swing passes. They're, that like they don't. This is not going to work. And all that. And, and Cliff was the quarterback, and, Welker was there. But yeah, that staff that you mentioned, I mean, like, the inaugural staff, it's got Aranda on it. It's got Art Briles on it. It's got Dana and Sonny and Bill. I mean, I guess technically it was Robert and I what was originally on that. Greg McMacken, I believe, was the DC.
Wow.
But as you look back to that, some of those early staffs, and then look what these people have done since then. And you mentioned, the Ruffins and the Luttrells and all these things that would come after that. And you look at what Dana and Sonny would go on to do. And yeah, then Lincoln Riley's now the head coach at USC, and he was just a walk-on quarterback from Muleshoe at the time, and he ended up being a GA. And I'll be honest, I remember there was some frustration amongst the staff. Like, man, Mike sure thinks a lot of this Lincoln guy. I don't know if he's given him a lot of, I don't know, power, or he's got a lot of say-so, or man, he's listening to him a lot or whatever. And I didn't know anything at the time. And I just was kind of, you hear people talking and everything. Well, he knew that Lincoln knew his stuff, man. And I think Lincoln has certainly proved it. But yeah, I just, and so
can I just while we're on Lincoln Riley, I almost look at him, Chris.
Yeah.
Lincoln and I are of a similar age. I was on campus at that time, so really following as closely as I could what was going on with Tech. Had a friend who was a GA as well, so would get info here or there. I really kind of think among all these guys, Lincoln Riley may be the most molded by Mike Leach, because some of these other guys were adults. Some of them were even into middle age and whatnot, and they've gone on to do their thing. And I'm not saying that Riley does everything Leach-esque or the same, but he literally was taking him from, hey, you're not going anywhere as a quarterback. Would you like to get under the headset? Would you like to become this? And I mean, yeah, lockstep there with Coach Leach. And I kind of think that maybe if you really want to look at a guy who came up and then finished the finishing classes, the finishing school of Mike Leach, Lincoln Riley may be my guy that I would select there.
Yeah, I don't, I'll never forget, and Lincoln's always been, he's always been, I mean, great to me ever since he's left here, but I'll never forget after Mike was, the divorce happens or whatever. And I do not want to spend any time focusing on that. It's not why we're here, but I remember seeing Lincoln, in front of Jazz of all places one day at lunch. Hey. And I can't remember if that was December or I guess it was in January after that bowl game versus Michigan State. And, we were just kind of chatting about his next move and next step. And he just had he portrayed no worries in the world. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to be just fine. And I'm thinking like, I was wanting to be worried for him. I didn't know where he was going, and boy, he it's like he had a secret, and like he's been just on this arc ever since. But and Sonny came with Mike from Kentucky, and I think Dana was at Iowa Wesleyan maybe at the time if memory serves. But they were just all kind of the same guy in many ways, but like these offensive. We got this new way of playing football and all that. And that's what I said that a lot yesterday and in conversations that I was a part of, that Mike never got the credit for really ahead of his time, how much he changed the football part. You and I talked about this a little bit, but it's wild to me that, I mean, you think about the slot receiver. And like you think about players like Julian Edelman, and then we know about Welker and Amendola, but you just think about like that player in the NFL and the slot receiver. I mean, Mike deserves a tremendous amount of credit for really identifying that position as the one that would make your offense different and just punish teams. Because when linebackers have to get matched up on the smallish, quick guy, it's a mismatch. And he's like, you know what? There's a lot of smallish, quick guys out there, and I can't go get the big 6'4" guys all the time, but I can live in a world where I get a bunch of the smallish. I can teach them to run routes and all that stuff. But and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a living way back whenever I first was around the program a lot, and being around Sonny and Dana, and I got to be really good friends with those guys. And I wasn't even doing anything with the broadcast. I was just kind of this internet media guy, and I'd get made fun of by traditional media because I mean the internet was like you're the nerd in the basement guys, what everybody thought back then. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And but I just kept showing up, man, and they kept trusting me, and we just built relationships. And I still talk to Dana and Sonny and Lincoln and all the Bill I saw, so it's that's my advice to people is no matter what you do in life, man, value real relationships, real ones. And they're very rewarding. And especially with what we do, Casey, man. And like, the relationship with Mike was very rewarding for me, and I hope it was for him. But everybody's got stories like I do about Mike, though, because he treated everybody the same. And I got calls at 2 a.m. I got calls on Christmas morning. I got calls wanting to talk about positives, negatives. I mean, just all kinds of stuff.
I wanted to ask you football wise, and you kind of answered my question. I wanted to ask you about, I think, what was one of the first things that you kind of noticed about his offense that you thought, here's a different tick that might work. And maybe it was that slot receiver was standing out. But I'm also curious, when the worm began to turn and there was some success that was happening, why was that? What was leading to all of a sudden the switch kind of flipping and things clicking from your view?
Yeah, I think when I realized that this would work is when everybody was so focused on, because if you obviously you remember Texas Tech always ran the ball, Bam Morris and Ricky Williams and Byron Hanspard, and you just go back, James Hadnot, you go back through the list, and this was always 3 yards in a cloud of dust. We're going to hammer it at you, and we're going to be really good at it. And that's our identity, and swarm defense and all that stuff. But whenever I realize, like they throw the ball for as many yards as they do, but Torian Henderson was the secret. Torian Henderson was the player that really made it all work.
The straw that stirs the drink, baby.
Absolutely. And when teams could stop Torian Henderson, they shut the whole thing down for the most part. And it was usually the Texases and the Oklahomas that had the speed from sideline to sideline that could kind of really take him out. But when teams had no answer for Torian and they're having to cover everything else, there's just too much room on the field. And but you were, Casey, you know this, but you were never out of a game under Mike, and there was some inconsistencies a bit that early on in his tenure where people were frustrated and all that. But as it would be built, there were very rare times when you like quote unquote no showed. Like we've really praised Joey's team this past season for they were competitive every time out, and then the one time they weren't, Baylor, you turn it over 5 times, going to happen to you. But everything else, you're in those games. And that's the way Mike's teams would grow to be. You were never out of a game. You scared teams to death because of what you were capable of. And I think, I think down 38-7 in
Phoenix.
And I guess Phoenix against Minnesota, and you come back and win it. I remember because there was some of these games where it like puts your program on the national map. And I 2 years before that, it's beating Aaron Rodgers in the Holiday Bowl.
Smoking
and that was
Aaron Rodgers.
You just smoked Aaron Rodgers and
in the Holiday Bowl.
And was it Marshawn Lynch or was it I can't but it was those were like national moments for Texas Tech football at a time when it was really difficult to like make news for the right reasons. And those were big deals, man. And I just like, he was putting this thing on the map. And, and then the next year, you go to the Cotton Bowl, and then you come back and beat Minnesota, and, just kind of just this build. But it was like we all got spoiled by just how good and competitive you were. And then it got to be a point where, and I started doing talk radio early on in that tenure. I guess in 2005 was when I first started doing any kind of radio. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But it was like shortly after that, it was like 7 or 8 wins wasn't quite good enough. People wanted more and more. And he almost gave it to him in 2008. But I love my interactions with the guy. He just, I'm not sure if I'm doing what I'm doing now, sitting here talking to you, if not for my relationship with him and his trust in me.
Yeah, he was that dude that was planted in the middle of your road to make a fork, and you went the way you were supposed to. And we meet a lot of people like that and don't know it at the time, but probably appreciate them even more so as they get further and further in that rear view. I think for me, the first affable moment for Mike Leach beyond football, Chris, was taking the hot air out of the meteorologist's balloon on a local television. Who doesn't want to clown a meteorologist? Hey, what do? Go outside? Boom, right? Yeah. And he appreciates mud rain in West Texas.
Yes.
We've got wild weather, and a man that's interested in it is after my own heart. But I also think from a fan, and that's the only position from which I can speak on Mike Leach, all the things you mentioned there, how fun it was to never be out of the game. You see comebacks that you cannot believe. But at the end of it all, to me, it was first. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetOnline, your headquarters for live stats, live betting, scores, odds, lines, props, more than ever before. As we're getting into that home stretch of football season, NFL playoffs going to be just around the corner. Bowl season almost on deck. You want to get the BetOnline to check out all the angles, all the action, all the angles on the action. The easiest place to keep up with your team on game day and the events that matter to you. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about what the trends are looking like this week with BetOnline, where the game starts. But at the end of it all, to me, it was his seeming defense of a fan base against haughtier neighbors elsewhere in the state and beyond. Sometimes a soldier can beat a pirate. And I don't know that Texas Tech fans have been defended all that often, even by some of those who are getting paid the most to wear their school clothes. But that's one thing that stood out to me fairly early on, because that comment was kind of early on, I guess, in the overall tenure. And that's where the rapport, I think, really got ramped up and exploded to the point that you're flying skull and crossbones at Jones Stadium. If you bring back DeWitt Weaver, hey, skull and crossbones, what? I mean, it's just wild to think about that explosion as far as the rapport between a head coach and their fan base. And I think it was because of some of that defense of West Texans or Tech fans in general, in a way.
Yeah, I think the most important thing you could ever have as a program or athletic department, or however you want to phrase this, is whenever a coach takes over a program, the hardest thing to instill in it and then to play to it is have an identity. And I think with Mike, whenever you started seeing it rolling, you saw that double T, you thought they throw the ball all over the place. That's what became your identity and your brand and all those things. And like air raid terminology wasn't even his term. They just kind of named it that and started playing the siren, and away it went. But like right. But his love for pirate and just his research and all his outside interests almost kind of spilled over into what your brand was. And I thought it was just fascinating. And back when Texas Tech was searching for, back when you're trying to figure out where your place is in the Big 12 and all those kinds of things. I just thought that was a lot of fun for a lot of people, because they were, the skull and crossbones. I mean, Mike used to, he would say, I told Gerald, man, that they need to put a zip line off of the double T scoreboard and get this go-kart and let somebody hang from the zip line and down there with a pirate flag. And he's like, why don't we do this kind of stuff? And he's just rambling on.
That's Roof Raider, Chris. That's Roof Raider.
He's like rambling on, and I'm just dying laughing. And he's dead serious. And he's like, I just don't know. I don't understand why we don't do this kind of stuff. I mean, he's talking four-wheelers and pirate flags and people hanging from zip lines and all this. I mean, and he was all about the show, and
sure.
Every idea that he had was a good one. He felt like, and
obviously,
yeah.
I think he was about the show, Chris, because he was about the fan, maybe at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, he was about the common man, because the thing that and Casey, you probably know a million people like this in this world that are in your circle. We all do, that make a pretty good living, but that are not just very happy. And Mike wasn't going to be one of those people. Now he would end up making a lot of money in his profession, but he was not making hardly any money as he made his way in the coaching profession. But he had just decided a long time ago, after the law degree, I'm going to be miserable if I go do this. This doesn't make me tick. I like ball. I like being around young people. I like being around fans. This whole thing is fun. The show is fun. The sport is fun. I like coaching. I like calling plays and all that stuff. And I hope there's people out there, man, that heed that advice, because don't be miserable for a paycheck, man, if you don't like what you're doing. But he was willing to take a chance on himself, and it obviously would pay off and all that. But he was just about he was about the common man, and he. I just remember back in some of those ideas that he would have, and he was just he'd crack himself up. He also would ask you anytime you were talking about Giovanetti, and I talk about this story all the time, but anytime he would talk about somebody it would just come up. This is how he would phrase it. Excuse my language here, but this was his phrase. He'd be like, Dicker, good guy. I'm like, what? He's like, Dicker, good guy. And I'm like, well, he's like, no, one or the other. That was his test. And you had to pick one or the other. Like, is he a Richard or is he a good guy? There was no
That's
middle
what it
ground.
boils down to, right?
Yeah, that's right. He wanted you to label him like, no, I need to know right now, like one or the other. There's no middle ground. So
let's get down to brass tacks.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's just like we run it or passing it. There's no in between. So
I think we clearly know what needs to happen in tribute to Mike Leach. And I think on a couple of different fronts, just in honor of his views on some things. Number one, here locally, Roof Raider needs a return and obviously needs to be zip lining down to the 50-yard line before kickoff. I never thought about the zip line, but I've been fighting for the return of Roof Raider for a long time. Maybe the third down clickers as well. It's just another idea for another episode. But now that you've brought this zip lining idea up, Roof Raider in a pirate motif, let's make it happen. And this man, Chris, was a proponent of a 64-team college football playoff. And I'm telling the college football playoff committee, you're yellow if you won't institute it in honor of the great Mike Leach. Let's go. We hadn't agreed to this 2026 thing just yet, have we? We can fit in, another 42? I think so. 52?
Yeah,
Sorry, what's school in Lamb County?
He was offering that up years ago, and I think people at the time kind of thought, he's crazy. This will never work. But I mean, you're working toward. It'll never be like what he wanted. It was just like, man, it should be just like the basketball tournament. Let everybody in, But have you heard his quote about meaning how it hurts the regular season? Have you heard this one? Yeah, he says something to the effect of he's like because that's the knock. If the more we expand the playoff, sure, it hurts the more the regular season. And he goes, man, I can't get a good sandwich in my house in October. You know why? My wife's in there watching meaningful football. That's why. So he's
exactly.
That's right. He's like that's not going to change. So she's still going to be. I'm still not going to be getting a good sandwich in October because she's going to be watching meaningful football. But
I'm glad he lived in the time of the video camera and microphone, right? I mean, good grief. Think of all we would have lost if it was just a stone tablet era when Mike Leach was on the sideline.
Yeah, I mean, some of these video montages, man, they are.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they are greatness, man. I mean, tip of the cap to Mike for entertaining the masses for as long as he did. There's so many, and obviously we weren't a part of it on a daily basis when he left to go to Pullman, and obviously was in Starkville the last several years. But the one story about somebody's telling it today about, or I guess it was yesterday about. Yeah, I just texted him and was writing a story about pranks played in college football, and like, hey, what's the best one you've ever heard? And he's like, so he immediately calls me. He's talking to the writer, and he's like, calls him up, and he says, he's like, well, let me tell you about the one time. He goes, and he gives me this long story. The point of it wasn't the story that he gave. He's like, but like 10 minutes go by and I hear all these whistles in the background. It's like he called me during his practice. So he couldn't wait to tell me about the pranks and all that. And it's like I'm hearing whistles in the background, but it's like that's just that's what you get, man. And that's what made him great, man. So
what are assistants for, right?
Yeah, yeah, man. They're gonna let people do their job. Absolutely. So
he did spend time elsewhere, but never spent time any longer as a head coach than he did in West Texas. I selfishly will say I think Texas Tech was the best fit for Mike Leach, and I think Mike Leach so far has been the best fit in the modern era for Texas Tech because you're talking about success. Obviously, as a program that you have not mirrored, he has been able to have success elsewhere, but with lesser programs as far as historical success. And we'll always wonder about what it might have been, but I know what it was, Chris, and it was 10 years of fun. And that's the only reason I'm ever buying a ticket, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, entertainment, man. I mean, I will never forget walking out of we used to host his coach's show in the football building. That was prior to Learfield, and they didn't have a deal with a restaurant and all that stuff. It was an in-house deal. And I'll never forget walking out of there the Thursday night before that famous Texas game, and you're literally walking out of the building, and the tents are on the street up until the curb, and you couldn't almost even walk out of the building without just students and fans and interest. And he's sitting there, talking about Jackie Sherrill, of all people, sat in. Jackie Sherrill, former longtime coach at Texas A&M, was a friend of Mike's, and he sat in with the coach's show with us one night. I think it was that week, and he just was an interested observer, wasn't on the air or anything. But they're sitting there telling these stories about. You realize that like the closest hotel room for these media folks coming to this game is like they're having to stay in Amarillo and in Abilene and all that. And I'm just like, but that was so much of that was a credit to Mike and what he'd built, man. And like it was wild, pure entertainment. And I just don't know if we realized at the time how much fun we were all having and how good those memories were going to be, because we've gone through this period of time where you don't get those memories, very often. And, but yeah, I will be indebted to him for forever for just like how much fun all that was for somebody that liked, tech and football as much as we do, man.
Oh yeah. I mean, that singular night, it stands alone. I have not seen multiple pickups carrying multiple people in the bed down University Avenue, all firing shotguns since. It may have happened. I just haven't seen it, and will remain probably singular for the remainder of my life. I think about in my modern Texas Tech football fandom era, Chris, I think about the iconic moment of Spike Dykes being carried off by E.J. Holub, and I think about Mike Leach's guns going up as he's heading up the tunnel there in the southwest corner. And
there was times when he had a cowboy hat on when he was doing that, and it wasn't even his cowboy hat. I mean, just like, absolutely, man. I mean, absolutely. God, may he rest in peace, man.
Yeah, man. Godspeed to Mike Leach. What else can we say? It was a lot of fun, and again, that's about all you can ask for as a sports fan. Appreciate you guys for hanging with us on Locked On Texas Tech today, being your first listen every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. It means so much to us. We hope that you'll make Locked On Sports Today your second listen, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Chris, tough conversation, tough time for everyone who is fond of Mike Leach, which is a lot of folks this week, man, but appreciate you grinding through it and for the insights and the memories that only you could deliver.
Yeah. This one hit me hard, man. Just the suddenness of everything. He's 61 years old, and I guess in the back of my mind, I'm thinking eventually he retires and he goes and does TV and entertains us all. Maybe that was just the selfish part of me. I just saw the guy a year ago in Memphis, and he was doing great. And this has all been very heavy and very sudden. And, but I've really appreciated the fans for remembering fondly his tenure here, because it deserves to be remembered that way.
Yeah. Quotes and things like that is not going to stand the test of time for the most part. But I think the way that a person makes you feel never leaves you, even when they do. So I think a lot of us are going to be feeling that for days, weeks, months, years, and decades to come in the best way. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us once again. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. We are back at it on the other side on Locked On Texas Tech.